My dad said, we're not going to have 50, but maybe 100 people here. Well, I teach business administration, and I'm trying to help students visualize what they may be able to do in their lifetime. Because it's hard when you're a kid to think of achieving things. And I said, here in Waverly, we've got stories. We've got stories on farms. We've got stories in shops of people, heroes as I see it in business. They show up every morning. They put in a day's work. They deliver value. They're heroes. But it's hard to see those stories when you're a kid in college. Well, I felt Waverly had a story with the Shield Bantam Company, not just because I'm Wilbur's son, but because I'm in business and I see these things. So I felt there was a need for the museum to have a video, so that when a kid walked into that museum, instead of just seeing a piece of iron sitting there with a bucket beside it, they could understand the story. So there was a need, but I had two problems. The first one is, Wilbur is not Vern. If Vern had wanted, if I talked to Vern, hey, let's do a story, let's do a video. Well, sure, let's do a video. Talk to Wilbur. Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I've been around him long enough to know that means no. But sometimes fate intervenes. And it was the president of Wartburg College that in my mind translated my dream into some reality in a very roundabout way. Because Grant Price, who I'll introduce in a minute, was trying to do a video on the history of Iowa broadcasting, and he wanted to get people that had been involved in Iowa radio in the 30s. And the president of Wartburg College, Vogel, mentioned Wilbur and Vern Shield. And so Grant Price interviewed Wilbur and Vern as a part of the history of Iowa broadcasting. And I saw how well my father got on with Grant Price. Because I had two problems, remember? The first was Wilbur is not Vern. The second is you need a storyteller to tell a story. And I'm not the storyteller. My dad's not looking to be the storyteller. You need a storyteller. And I looked at Grant Price and I said, we've got our storyteller. It took a little time after that to convince my dad to go along, but as you can see, we've succeeded. And so I want to turn the microphone over to our master storyteller, who looked at this project and said, this story deserves to be told. He threw himself into this project. He digested the history. He translated it into something that you can see in a video, worked with the students, put up with the family, who always had one little more thing they wanted to change, right? So, please welcome Grant Price.
I bring my own cue cards along with me. Could I see the person who brought this wonderful artifact of what we're talking about in here tonight? Would you stand, please, sir? And this, I believe, is the shields from Benton County. Who are you, sir?
Big Shield John Shield from Belle Plaine.
From Belle Plaine. That's where the Shields family came from, folks. So thank you so much for adding this bit of color to what we're doing here tonight. And thank you both. Thank you for being here.
Vern gave that to me a few years ago, and he said, hang that up in your garage, and every time you get in your car, you'll think of me.
Well, we're going to... There it is. Well, if you don't believe that's a magic word, just look around here tonight. It's hard to get people to come out and participate, I heard, someplace. Not here tonight. And I think the reason is because of the legacy that we're talking about. And I know many of you who are here tonight have had a hand in that legacy in one way or another. Let me just embellish slightly on what Milo has already told you about this very circuitous route that all of us took in order to get this project done. Back in the days when I was still a broadcaster, back in the days when there still was such a thing as public interest broadcasting, editorial. One of the charges that station executives had was to do ascertainment, that is, to ascertain community needs. And a part of that process was to identify community leaders within the viewing listening area and seek them out and go around and interview them. And I was involved in that process as the news executive, certainly. And so one of the ascertainment interviews that I lined up was with a man named Vern Shield. Of course, I knew quite a bit about Vern because he had been retired for many years then, and I identified him primarily with the self-help organization, that wonderful concept that he had for helping third world agriculture. And so I made the trip up to Waverly, and I found the windmill down there on Bremer Avenue, and that's where Vern was, not sitting in an office with a plush chair, but where do you think I found him? In the shop. In the shop. And I didn't find out a hell of a lot about community needs, but I found out a lot about self-help and that wonderful little machine that Vern had conceptualized and put into the mix of that organization. So I knew Vern Shield through that and some later involvement with the self-help organization, but I apologize, Wilbur. Vern didn't tell me about you. But trust Vogel, he'll get it done. And when we got into this broadcasting history project that we've been involved in here at the college, was sitting with Bob at lunch or something one day talking about that, and as Milo indicated, I said, I'd just really like to find people who were in that marvelous period in the early radio history where the owners were as cheap as they are today. Except they had a better reason. They weren't making any money. They were looking for people who would come in and entertain as long as they didn't have to pay them. I mean, that was literally true. So here comes these two brothers, the Limestone Boys, Vern and Wilbur Shield, knocked on the door of the studios of WMT Radio in Waterloo at that time, and said, we entertain for the community. How could we get on the radio? And with all that talent standing in front of them, they said, absolutely. And so Vern and Wilbur were on WMT Radio for a couple of years as the Limestone Boys, entertaining weekly. So that wound up with about 45 seconds in the broadcasting history video, which lasted an hour. So we needed to do more. So when I sat down to interview Wilbur about that little vignette, as I sat with this man over there in the museum, I said, this is a story. And that's my business, finding stories. So it's just been a privilege to put this story together with the assistance of some marvelously able young people. And that's what we're going to show you here tonight. The Limestone Boys and their small but scrappy band. Transformation of this collection of used parts into a machine spawned an industry employing 500 people with annual sales of $10 million in less than 2 decades. It is one of Iowa's great entrepreneurial achievements. However, it's not so much about a machine, known as Bantam No. 1, as it is a story about two brothers, rooted in the Iowa farm family tradition of hard work and rural ingenuity, who did what they could with what they had. Vern and Wilbur Shield came to Bremer County in the darkest days of the 1930s Depression, and they built a machine which revolutionized the construction business. It also left an indelible imprint on the community of Waverly and the state of Iowa. The Limestone Boys is the story of Wilbur and Vern Shield and the Shield Bantam Company. The machines which Shield Bantam manufactured at its Waverly plant and marketed worldwide were identified by the feisty Bantam rooster, which became the company trademark. The small but scrappy Bantam symbolizes the need filled by the Shield invention, a machine for its time. Equipment manufactured for materials handling and excavation in the 1930s was too large for small-scale operations, such as the limestone quarry just north of Waverly where the business originated. A smaller, mobile, versatile machine which could dig, hoist, and load was the niche which Bantam No. 1 and its successors would fill. Vern Shield made the first one, a drag line, to load trucks hauling lime from the quarry he and Wilbur operated. Demand for the little machine that could was immediate. When a neighboring gravel pit operator saw Bantam No. 1, he wanted to buy it, so Vern sold it to him and made Bantam No. 2, which he also sold. And so it went, until 20 years later, when the business was sold, it was manufacturing far more sophisticated machines and marketing 1,000 or more units a year across the U.S. and in places as far away as South Africa. The genius which sparked this American success story was a blend of two brothers with very different personalities. Wilbur's son Milo characterizes it this way: Vern built the machine and Wilbur built the company. Both men got their hands grimy in the shop in the early days, and both were intricately involved in managing their rapidly growing company. But fundamentally, Vern was the mechanic, and Wilbur was the marketing-savvy salesman. The differences which complemented each other so well in the business were evident to their sister Viola at the time the 7 siblings in the Shield family were growing up on the farm. In a family reminiscence, Viola remembered Vern as the one with gears and wheels in his head, whose whole interest was in machines. His curiosity once led him to dismantle the engine in their 1916 Buick. Vern had the parts spread out on the floor when his surprised father showed up, looking for a ride to town. Wilbur, on the other hand, was the free spirit remembered by his sister as the one who never brought any homework to study but seemed to know all the answers. Never used a bridle on his pony, just pulled on her mane to tell her which direction to go. The machines which Wilbur, Vern, and their helpers assembled at the quarry from existing parts were the prototype for the M47, the first in a series of production models which would follow. They were manufactured in a plant which the Shield brothers constructed in Waverly in 1946 to keep up with the demand for Shield Bantam products. Ownership, style, mode of operation, and product line have changed radically. But 60 years after Bantam No. 1 was sold, the Waverly industry created by the Shield brothers continues as a major player in the global construction industry. The cranes produced at the Waverly plant today by the Terex company have a reputation grounded in the same principles of innovation and product quality which Shield Bantam established. This is a story about two brothers, Wilbur and Vern Shield, and remarkable achievement with their small but scrappy Bantam, a machine for its time. The beginnings of this story of the Limestone Boys and their small but scrappy Bantam goes back to their rural roots in the 19th century. Fred and Emma Shield left Benton County and settled on land near Haywarden in northwest Iowa. In 1902, Vern, their fourth child, was the first born in this house they built on their Sioux County farm. Wilbur, born 7 years later, was next to the youngest of their 7 children. On that pioneer farm, powered by horses and manual labor, the brothers learned the discipline of hard work, which began before breakfast.
We didn't have breakfast until we milked 2 or 3 cows and fed the hogs and named it. You had your chores to do and before you sat down for breakfast. And so I was up early in the mornings, and that was just part of living.
Besides the work, the children's lives revolved around the Mount Joy Church of God, located just half a mile from the farmstead, the one-room school they attended, and music, which was an important part of family life. In 1919, the Shields decided to sell the Iowa farm and relocate in Minnesota, where Fred established a prosperous farming operation. A decade later, that decision would crash around them.
Moving there in 1919, approximately, or 18, and of course the crash come along in 29, and of course then we lost everything, because the reason, I think, at that particular time, the bankers, when Dad sold the farm in Sioux County, the bankers kept Dad's signature on the bank in Sioux County, guaranteeing their payments. Well, no way that he could keep both Minnesota land going and Iowa land going, so it just had to let everything go back.
So, at ages 60 and 57, Fred and Emma look into the face of adversity and start over. In Iowa, on this land near the Cedar River north of Waverly, Vern, now 27, joins his father on the farm and rents another 80 acres. The phrase, "I did what I could with what I had," is attributed to Vern in a family history. But it was the creed which drove both brothers in the creation of a machine and a business that would mechanize work largely done by hand in the 1930s, a revolutionary change. It started in a quarry owned by the Shields' neighbor, Charlie Colburn. He was in the business of mining and crushing limestone, which was spread on farmland to improve productivity, a business that was not going well in the depression-racked farm economy of the times. However, the Shield brothers saw possibilities and decided to take over and operate the quarry. Waverly attorney Bill Engelbrecht, longtime friend and legal advisor, recalls that Vern was not able to obtain financing from local banks to upgrade quarry equipment, which kept breaking down.
Anchor Jewell, Ralph Jewell's dad, a farmer north of Waverly, loaned them enough money to buy a commercial crusher on the strength of Howard Roach at Plainfield buying the crushed lime for agricultural purposes. And that's how Vern got started.
The site where the Shield enterprise started is now largely filled in and produces alfalfa. But back in the 30s, after a hard day's work at the quarry, Wilbur recalls drawing on their musical heritage as entertainers. The brothers appeared at community events and on the radio, promoting their business as the Limestone Boys.
We couldn't advertise, or otherwise we'd had to pay. Well, we didn't have money to pay for anything, but they called us the Limestone Boys, and we just left it go at that. We got a little advertising.
However, their celebrity was not enough to overcome the tough times, and business was slow at the quarry. Wilbur decided to take his fortunes to Indiana. After being laid off from a factory job, he started a wholesale produce business, using a rented truck, his natural sales ability, and the Shield philosophy: do what you can with what you have.
They didn't hardly know a potato from another potato. Didn't realize there was that many varieties of potatoes, but I sold them, and it made, at least I got my money back.
Wilbur did better than that. He broadened the potato business into a successful fruit and vegetable wholesale enterprise, serving 20 grocery stores. Back in Iowa, Vern plugged away at the limestone business, which received a shot in the arm from an FDR New Deal program, which offered payments to farmers to improve their land. Trucks lined up as orders for lime jumped from 5 to 150 tons, and it was straining operations at the quarry where most of the work was hand labor.
During this time, though, Vern built a small machine for the quarry. He needed a small drag line, and so he got a few used parts together.
That was Bantam number 1, now preserved in the Shield Museum in Waverly. Vern fashioned a full 360-degree revolving drag line, scaled to fit his needs. He used what he had: a hoist salvaged from a junkyard, powered by a Ford Model A engine. The machine rotated on a turntable adapted from a Hartpart tractor drive gear, and it was mounted on a used international truck which had 100,000 miles on it. The genius of Vern's invention can be seen in this demonstration of Calvin Koiker's restored 1947 Bantam with Wilbur at the controls. It was its capability to mechanize operations which were being done by hand. With 2 or 3 bites, the Bantam could load a truck in a fraction of the time it took men working with shovels to do it. A gravel pit operator from neighboring Denver saw the first Shield machine and bought it. The second was snapped up by the operator at Sumner, and that generated a new idea.
And that gave us the idea, well, there was hundreds of these small gravel pits in Iowa, and we thought, well, they all need a small machine. They have no use for a large, there was larger machines built,
Right.
but they had no use for a big machine, a lot more expensive.
It was a pivotal moment in the development of the Bantam concept into the Shield Bantam Company. It was 1943. Wilbur gave up his wholesale business in Indiana, moved back to Waverly, and the brothers started building Bantams in a small barn which still stands at the quarry site.
When we started, and Mr. Holmes, who was a welder, and my brother Vern and I, we built 9 machines the first year we started in this barn. We had to move the cows and whatever else was in the barn, we took over, and this was our factory. At that time, we sold them as fast as we could build them.
The next year, they let the cows back in the barn and moved the operation to a new building they constructed at the site. These sketches, hand-drawn by Melvin Holmes, the brothers' first employee, guided assembly of the machines created there. They sold 29 the first year, priced at around $3,000 a unit, and 90-some the year after that. The idea of the small, versatile machine was rapidly catching on.
Just grew that fast, which really to keep up with that and get equipment and men space to do those things, it just required working around the clock. We built a fairly good sized building out there at the quarry, but of course as production increased, that building soon was too small.
Their conclusion that the building was too small to handle the demand led the brothers into a bold new venture. It would play a key role in America's post-war construction boom and have a major impact on the Waverly community. It was 1945, the war was ending, and the Shield brothers took a major step in building the Shield Bantam Company. In its creative thinking, it was as bold and far-reaching as Vern's basic invention. They would leave the quarry, construct a plant, and engineer and manufacture from scratch an increasingly refined and sophisticated version of the Bantam No. 1 concept. The 2 farm boys would develop a global market and sell thousands of the little machines that could beat men working with shovels by a country mile, and do a lot of other construction jobs more efficiently and at a cost a small operator could afford. The Shields formed a partnership corporation and moved their fledgling business to the 13,000 square foot manufacturing facility they constructed in Waverly. They were entering a very competitive world, a high-risk venture. It demanded skilled engineers, trained machinists, cost accountants, and a workforce that would number in the hundreds. It would take them into high finance, complex management, and sophisticated marketing. Bob Mung, who started his career as a snag grinder in the Bantam shop and went on to become president and general manager of 3 equipment manufacturing companies, appreciates the risk the Shields were undertaking.
They had, you've heard this before, I'm sure, the right product at the right time. But that took some risk-taking because neither of them had a lot of capital when they started that business.
The brothers were committing their little company to monumental change, from just assembling components others had made to manufacturing a machine from raw steel to refined product.
We did all our own manufacturing, and then we, of course, had engineers and engineered our own equipment. We didn't buy a hoist and things like that. We engineered and built that from raw.
All the components.
All the raw steel, had our own patterns for gear works, things of that nature. And
Their first production model, the M47, went on the market as a more refined machine than the quarry Bantams, but it retained the small-scale characteristics which gave it unique market appeal. With 5-ton lifting power and 1/3 yard bucket capacity, the Bantam dragline was small enough to mount on a truck, which gave it mobility. Once again, the Shield brothers seized the opportunity of the moment. The Army's rugged 6x6s were ideal for the purpose. Purchased as war surplus at a fraction of the cost of new equipment, they became the standard rolling platform for the first generations of production Bantams. However, the Bantam no longer is just a dragline. The Shields add versatility to its mobility. For lifting purposes, it was rigged as a crane. They developed both backhoe and shovel and dozens of other attachments. Shield Bantam production was timed and targeted with uncanny precision on market forces of the time. Post-war America generated unprecedented demand for housing. With the government committed to financing new home construction, there were basements, water and sewer lines to be dug, and new streets and roads to be built. The mobile Bantams, which rolled off the production line at the new plant in Waverly, hit the need exactly. The Bantam could come in, set up, dig, and move on to the next job with great efficiency.
Coming out of World War II, not too many years, and there was a great demand for that, and more demand for the smaller sizes. Small contractors that were just getting started, and I would say that was the main thing. At that time, we dominated our size in the industry.
The founder of a major Waverly construction company was one of those small contractors. However, Irv Happel started out as a Bantam employee. He had planned to take a month off when he got home in 1946 after 3 years' service in the Marines. But Wilbur persuaded him to go to work immediately.
And he says, Irv, he says, I can use you out there at the shop tomorrow morning for a welder. And I says, well, I want to take off. And well, he says, you can always take off later on. We need a welder real bad. So I went out there.
He started at the quarry plant, but when the Shields opened their new facility in Waverly, Happel and Bill Winkleman were the first 2 employees to begin work there.
We were the first 2. And, gosh, we got into that new building down there and says, Jeebers, I don't know what we're going to do. He says, this looks like there's too much room for us to.
It was. They were soon joined by others in this crew, which turned out the first of the new generation of Bantams. Happel saw the success customers were experiencing with the machines they were creating, and he and his brother-in-law decided to go into business for themselves. Using Happel's GI loan and $500 Elton Hellwig borrowed, they bought a Bantam M47 and found themselves doing contract work with the city of Redwood Falls, Minnesota. It was a time when most sewer trenches were still being dug by hand. The genius of the small mechanized excavator became immediately apparent. 2 men working with shovels could dig 50 to 100 feet on a good day.
And when we come in with our M47, we start digging for them. We get 300-400 feet in for them in a day, you know, which was great.
They also dug basements and did other related construction work, and the city wanted them to stay.
This engineer said, you come up here every year for a few years, and he says, I'll get you started in the sewer business. See, this is how we got started.
From that start, Happel built a family business in which they used 5 Bantam machines.
And at one time, I had 38 employees working for me. I was working all over the country. And this all happened through our Shield Bantam that we established a business, you know.
The Shield machines leveraged the dreams of many other would-be entrepreneurs in the post-war period. Les Zelli, who worked in the engineering department for 38 years, called the Bantam a machine for its time.
It was a machine that the first-time owner could afford and make some money with. A lot of field tile trenching was going on at the time, so the trench hoe was a popular item. And then, of course, small contractors, of which there were quite a few right after the war, as you recall. And it just all fit. It was a machine for its time.
The 1947 Bantam was in production when Zelli, fresh out of college, joined the company. But he soon was at work designing an improved version, the M49.
I was on the ground floor when the engineering began on that M49, and I did quite a bit of work on that, and I'm quite familiar with that machine. To make it more reliable, to make a little, get more capacity out of it, more work out of the machine.
Soon the market for Bantams would expand well beyond small contractors. This shipment was destined for the Navy, and a model known as the ABM-51 was modified so it could be moved on military transport planes during the Korean War. But the big breakthrough in model development came in 1953, when Bantam introduced the T-35, which incorporated major engineering changes.
This is the first attempt that we've made to incorporate a crawler machine, a self-propelled machine, and a truck-mounted machine with the same series of upper basic units.
Consolidation of all control functions in one operator location made the self-propelled version the hot seller of the new T-35 line.
You could operate in tighter quarters and things like that. And so it was immediately acceptable to the industry. And I believe maybe we were first in the self-contained unit in our size range.
As the Bantams were modified and refined, they also were becoming larger and more powerful. The CR-350 was an upgrade with an 11-ton crane capacity. Up to this point, the Bantams were all cable-actuated machines. But pressure was coming from competitors using hydraulic technology, and the company met the challenge with its first hydraulic model.
We came up with a hydraulic excavator which was well received in the field. In fact, matters we sold a ton of those.
The growing use of hydraulic systems was just one of the changes sweeping over the industry as the story of the Limestone Boys moved into the 60s. Less than 2 decades had passed since Verne built Bantam No. 1, and the Shield brothers clearly had found a better way. Not just to dig ditches and perform a myriad of other construction jobs, but to sell their ideas and share the fruits of their enterprise with their customers, employees, the community, and the world. Waverly was home to a $10 million a year manufacturing business. In addition to its innovative products, Shield Bantam stressed quality and customer service, and customers responded by the thousands. As they approached the end of the decade of the 50s, Wilbur and Verne celebrated a landmark. 10,000 Bantams had rolled off the production line. Their 500 employees were turning them out at a rate as high as 1,000 units a year, and their market extended well beyond the boundaries of Iowa and the United States.
We began to sell a lot of equipment in South America and made many, many trips to South America. So it took you in lots of places that you just never dreamed as a farm boy of ever being there.
Both brothers traveled the world and talked up the Bantam, but Wilbur evolved as the point man on marketing and growing the business. He was the one who visualized the small but scrappy Bantam rooster as the symbol which would represent the product.
I happened to see this in the Saturday Evening Post. It was an advertising of this Bantam, and I tore out that page and showed it to Verne. I says, "Boy, that's our Bantam," and it was a real proud little fowl.
The Shield Bantam logo, which was developed from that idea, would be emblazoned on every machine the company produced and every sales tool used to market the product through the network of distributors the company established in the United States and abroad.
Wilbur has a lot of marketing savvy. He had been in the produce business, I believe, before he joined his brother. And I would say in all sincerity, Wilbur made it go. And that takes nothing away from Verne.
Verne had a mind that was mechanical. Anything mechanical, he just gravitated toward. I don't think Verne could have done what he did without Wilbur's help. And I don't think Wilbur could have done what he has done without Verne's help. So it was a working relationship.
There was one nice thing about the Shield organization. If you had a desire to make an impact on the business, they allowed you to do it. If you have an idea why, they'll listen.
Wilbur and Vern were two guys that had come from the farm background, and I think that's very important for the way they managed. They could talk to the lowest guy in the shop, the guy who swept the floors, and also the bankers in Chicago. And so everyone felt as if they were a part of a team.
Every Friday, they would have the coffee cart come into the plant. They'd stop production. A local bakery would bring out rolls and coffee, and Wilbur and Vern would tell them where they'd been and how they were doing.
Levon McEnany, who worked in the advertising department, recalls the mementos the brothers would bring back to the office staff from their world travels.
If Vern or Wilbur had been somewhere on a trip, they would bring us back something like maybe a hanky, a flower. One year they brought us this. I have no idea what year. Another big plus was our van, our sausage wagon, a big long limousine. Picked us up before 8 in the morning, took us home at noon for lunch, picked us up at 1 o'clock, and took us home at 5.
The Shield brothers' unique human relations practices also included one of the first profit-sharing plans in the country. Bob Mung recalls its beginning.
We sat out under this big maple tree on the grass and listened to Ernest talk about profit sharing. I was so impressed with it. It made a significant impact on me personally, enough so that later on in my career I was able to start 2 profit-sharing plans in 2 different plants that I was president of.
It also made a big impact on Shield Bantam employees who saw their stake in the company grow from the profits the business was generating.
When we merged, a lot of our employees could walk out there with $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for their retirement.
The Shield Bantam influence spread through the community in many other ways. Bill Engelbrecht characterizes the company as the crown jewel of Waverly industry.
It provided quality employment for many hundreds of people over the years, not only in Waverly and the surrounding area.
Here comes this homegrown company, and as you said, a better way to make something, and a useful tool, and then the possibility of taking it worldwide, and they did it. And I think a good part of the character and the quality of life in Waverly is this connection that Waverly has. I mean, northeast Iowa, but connected to the whole world.
Any worthwhile promotion in the community, the first stop of any fundraiser was the door of Vern and Wilbur Shield. And they always responded very, very generously.
They were generous people. They invested back into the community, the college, and the community have benefited in so many ways.
By 1955, the 2 farm boys, with 2 close management associates, H.L. Leslie and E.N. Neal, had grown their idea into the world's largest producer of truck-mounted power crane excavators. The next year, in 1956, they took the company public and brought in outside directors. The times were changing, the business was changing, and competition was intensifying.
Everything just kept growing. Cranes kept getting larger, and excavators became larger, and the crane tonnage went up to 35.
At the same time, Zelli notes, at the other end of the scale, agricultural equipment manufacturers were mounting backhoes and front-end loaders on farm tractors.
Kind of shorten up the lower end of the excavator line and for Bantam, and now it's either real small or seems like the larger ones.
There were other changes. The United Auto Workers Union had organized production workers at the plant. Bigness was in the early stages of becoming the watchword of American corporate development. And in 1963, 23 years after Vern built Bantam No. 1, the board of directors voted to merge Shield Bantam with the Coring Company, a manufacturer of large construction equipment.
The fitting of the 2 companies seemed to match up very well. And our brother being older and Mr. Leslie and those who were getting close to retirement, they felt as though I wasn't particularly too excited about the situation because still had quite a few years, but at that time it probably was probably the right thing to be doing. We're a public company, so we had stockholders to consider.
And so the business which Wilbur and Vern Shield created passed into the larger corporate world under the ownership of Coring. Later, Coring would be acquired by Terex, a $2 billion corporation headquartered in Connecticut. Terex produces earth-moving, mining, and construction equipment for the U.S. and world market. Today, the plant, which the Shields built on Bremer Avenue, operates as Terex Waverly Operations. In today's world of industrial outsourcing, it assembles hydraulic cranes in a range of 30 to 100 tons and manufactures the booms, which are the most critical components of this type of machine. Leon Deutsch says that emphasis on boom manufacturing makes the Waverly plant the center of excellence for hydraulic cranes in North America.
So we have a center of excellence in this plant that there are only 2 or 3 places in North America that make booms like we make booms.
Deutsch says the Shield philosophy of quality and service has been carried over from the Bantam days.
The emphasis on the quality and the service has been retained. We still have quite a large number of people in this facility that have between 25 and 30 years of service with the company. The Shield brothers' attitude and philosophy did not go away when they left the company in 1963.
And so the imprint of these two farm boys who found a better way and had the courage and the enterprise to take their idea to the world clings to the machines which roll out of Waverly today into the global marketplace of the 21st century. These were two men, Robert Vogel says, who knew their roots, and that gave them the freedom to think creatively beyond the limits, to risk and try new things.
You know, there is something about knowing where you're from, remembering where you're from, and having a sense of place. And they both had that. You think that that could be a restrictive thing to come from small rural community in Iowa, but actually gave them the freedom to be who they were any place in the world, because they always knew who they were and they knew where they were from. The combination, and Marge and Eileen were in it too, and really a remarkable story.
The Shield Bantam Company, a story of remarkable American enterprise and entrepreneurial achievement. Crafted by two extraordinary men, brothers Vern and Wilbur Shield, who, from the roots of their family heritage and values, created a machine for its time, a better way to do a hard job, in a limestone quarry north of Waverly, where the story began. And from the concept embodied in Bantam No. 1, they developed a series of increasingly sophisticated machines that could do more work at less cost. From that, they built a business which became the world's largest manufacturer of truck-mounted crane excavators. They shared the results of their enterprise with their customers, their employees, and their neighbors, and made the world a better place. Thank you, Vern and Wilbur Shield, the Limestone Boys, and your small but scrappy Bantam, proud symbol of the entrepreneurial spirit of Waverly's Shield Bantam Company. Now let me introduce others that I know, I think and know are here, who participated in the production of the video. With the crowd, I haven't seen everyone, so Bill Engelbrecht, are you here? Stand up, please, Bill. Irv Happel, I know, is here. Irv, stand. Levon McEnany. Levon, where are you? And Leon Deutsch. Les Zelli could not be here. He had responsibilities elsewhere this evening. But we certainly appreciate his contribution, as we also appreciate the contribution of Bob Mung and Bob Vogel. Now, this marvelous M47 that was paraded for us last summer, and to which the owner put in the hands of this reckless young shield boy to operate, is here tonight. So back from a spectacular performance with the M47 in Las Vegas is Calvin Quaker. And his father, John Quaker. You notice how he rode that running board? Thank you so much, gentlemen. What a marvelous contribution to have that machine. If you look at your the brochures that were handed out, this was put together to celebrate the fact that Calvin was invited to bring this marvelously restored 1947 machine to the International Construction Machinery Expo in Las Vegas just about a month ago. And a lot of folks were pretty impressed by what they saw out there, from what I hear, Calvin. So thank you for doing that. The representative of the Melvin Holmes family is here tonight. Would you stand, please, ma'am? And would you say your name, please? And you are his daughter. So say thanks to the Melvin Holmes family. As I call myself with apologies, a would-be historian, the really exciting things to come across are these marvelous artifacts that really speak to what this experience was. And that sketchbook did that more for me than anything else we came across. So thank you very much. And then Merle Shorty Peterson, are you here tonight, Shorty? Because a lot of those pictures in the shop were made available to us by Shorty Peterson, right? So thank you to him. And to Leonard Hill. Is Leonard here? Leonard, thank you for the use of the hall. Now, I suppose you all know, as Garrison Keeler says, that all Wartburg students are above average. Of course. And then there are some Wartburg students who are above average. And I want to introduce you to some of them here tonight. So would Randy Schumacher and Jessica McIninch come forward, please? And is Alyssa Connell here? I have not seen her. Believe Alyssa may have been consigned to her work duties tonight. These two young people, along with Alyssa's contribution, did the marvelous video work that you saw demonstrated in that video tonight. So please thank them. And believe me, they wouldn't let me touch that machine that you gave me. And there's a damn good reason for that. One more introduction. This brochure was sort of an outgrowth then of the convergence, my favorite word, Wartburg students, of the video project and Calvin's invitation to attend the expo in Vegas. So Wilbur thought it would be a great idea for Calvin to have a handout out there. And so we said, we've got just the folks who can do that here at Wartburg College, wouldn't you know? And their bug is on the back of the brochure. It's the Tower Agency, and the architect of this particular project is Katie Schatz. And where are you, Katie? Did she leave on us? Well, anyway, thank Katie Schatz for the work she did on this, because it was just a wonderful piece of work. Now, I think that I've just about exhausted everything I could say about this, except that we need to hear now from the star of the show, and Eileen has appointed Wilbur to do the talking.
We want to clear the house in a hurry. Here we go. Well, I'm not too sure. What are you saying? Well, half the time my son in it. Don't trust your kid. Don't ever trust him. They do things when you're not listening or not paying attention. They'll get you in trouble. We had 4 of them, didn't we, I think? But when this was being shown, you look back and realize what little things happen, and very, very little things. Bear with me for a bit. To get into this limestone business, I was up in Minneapolis with my brother. I was washing dishes in the YMCA for my meal. And I got a penny poster card from my brother. He says, come on down. He says, Mr. Coburn's got an old man's truck. He says, I think you could make a little money and rent it or something. So I come down. And that's the way we got. I rented that truck. I drove, and I've hauled line out to the logger shelters here, the Brydens, and just a lot of farmers around here on their farms. I've hauled tons and tons of line with that old nice truck with wooden wheels. And but that got us started. And then Charlie Coburn lived right across the road. But Charlie was not a good mechanic. Things were broken down so much at the time. And I told her, and I says, why don't we just take that Corey over, and we feel as though we could do a better job. So we talked to Charlie. We never signed no contract. I don't remember signing anything. We'll give you 5 cents a ton for every ton we crush. He says, go ahead. So then, I think the next Monday, we just took it over. No contract. Every ton we took out there, we gave them 5 cents. And, but look what that did. You know, if we wouldn't have done that, or that penny poster card wasn't mailed, just how simple can you get? That's the reason I'm here. How simple can you get? But emphasize the little things. You just don't have to have go into doing something and have to have thousands of dollars in your pocket. You just don't. If you just work, and really we worked, but everybody worked. It wasn't just a few. Everybody was working, and some of you folks I see out there, limestone have hauled on their farms. We appreciate yours. But this gentleman here, Calvin, was here in our city twice, and that M47, that there again, that was really, when I look back, that really started the company. Because before we was buying a hoist from construction machinery in Waterloo and buying a motor and trying to build a mainframe, few things like that. But then the M47, we engineered that from the trunnion base up. And that was our own design, which was a beautiful piece of equipment, did a lot of work. Plus then you kept every year or two, you had to keep the engineers busy, so we had to engineer the M47. But then we kept increasing and increasing. And as the story goes, well, at the time probably come to merge. Sure, like I said, I wasn't too excited about it, but when you look back, it was a good fit. There was no problem with that. I mean, you just wasn't ready to give up, so to speak. And now that we have the Terex company on the east side of town, we're happy that they're there. They're using the facilities for what it's built for. And that, there again, it's a big building out there, a lot of floor space, but the type of equipment to use in a place like that had to be what new builds and bands and what Terex is doing today. Had many overstructures things, I think. So we're very proud of their being used facilities the way they are. Well, thanks again for coming, but one thing, they advertise this as a premiere. I thought Hollywood had that. Right?
Where do you think you are?
Well, there's always something I always see it on TV, there's always something you do in a premiere. Could you be able to stand up, Grant? One thing hadn't been said here. Still, the most important people haven't stood up yet. These are band employees. Thank you. Hill, you can sit down anytime. That's the guy I had the most trouble with. I should have fired him long ago. Well, I think this sort of concludes it, does it, Mano?
Sure. Thank you.
Again, don't trust your kids. Eileen, why don't you stand? Take a bow. Come on.
Do I have the wives of the guys that are deceased, the wives of the guys that are deceased, or band employee guys? I don't know.
Another thing happened when I was when we were living in Indiana. We had two boys at that time, and we decided to, Gwen and I, to start the company. And of course, I had a good wholesale business going. I serviced about 20 grocery stores 6 days every morning, 6 days a week. Get up and go to Indianapolis at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and get a load of fresh stuff. And did that for 10 years. So that was not easy, but it was a good business. But then when we decided to go...
Who decided?
Huh? Quit jabbing him.
Let me tell you what you said.
Oh, I didn't do that.
Wilbur. Yes. Yeah, word for word. He said, I didn't want to go because he had built us a new house and we had a lot of young married friends and I wanted to stay there. And he says to me, I'm going. Are you coming or not? That's exactly what he said. Oh, now, see, it wasn't that clear. I don't sew, I don't knit. I stayed up all night crying and knitting a little rug for our bathroom. I didn't want to come. Now I wouldn't be anywhere else. The wonderful bunch of people.
Waverly has been very, very good to us. Thanks again.
And I'm going to stay with him. We've just celebrated 64 years of marriage.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Every time she says that, I say 64 long grinding years.
Well, sometimes...
We're very happy. We have 4 boys, all active in different types of businesses. Many of them got into the machinery business. But so, again, thanks for coming out this evening. I didn't know who was going to fill the auditorium. I think they're planning little refreshments out there.
If they don't run out.
If they don't run out. So, anything else? Good night, everybody. Thanks again.
How come, like, some stuff sucks? But then, like, some stuff is pretty cool.
You need stuff that sucks to have stuff that's cool. But then, you know, like, breaking stuff is cool.
Music that doesn't suck. 89.1 KWAR, The One.
Kiss me, baby, one more time.
Back to the box.
Well, I started this story in the middle of the page. I remembered the lines and forgot my age. When somebody said my attitude was snotty, that's when you call and say get out tonight. I catch a late night movie on a late night flight. I'll be getting real drunk and making fun of everybody. Ain't nobody gonna get me down. Something must have gone around. Hey, you can stick that sign up your ass. The one that says it won't last. My sugar buzz is growing higher and higher every day. Your sarcasm cuts like a knife. I have the time of my life. My sugar buzz is growing higher and higher every day. To a party last Saturday night, you know, I think I got laid, then I got in a fight. I don't remember that much, but I think I liked it. I saw some band called Roses and Stocky, and they brought back the rock, and the singer was cocky. 2 years later, I'm sure they'll forget about it. Ain't nobody gonna get me down. Something must have gone around. Yeah, you can stick that sign up your ass. The one that says it won't last. My sugar buzz is growing higher and higher every day. Your sarcasm cuts like a knife. I'll have the time of my life. My sugar buzz is growing higher and higher every day.
The One, The One, The One, The One, The One.
Some call me a loser, some call me a cheater, some say I'm a selfish, untalented dreamer, cause all I try to do is keep my dream alive, but it's so hard to do when you're working 9 to 5. I've never been one afraid to die, but I'm afraid to leave behind the precious life that grows through the sands of time, cause now I've got 2 daughters and I know they need their father to help them make it through all of the devious things that people do, cause every moment counts from the good times to the bad. I don't have time to envy, those are kind of things I've never had, cause the one thing most important is the one we take for granted until your life is on that line. Think it's the way God had planned it, to open up your eyes and make you realize that there's some life is money, but what's money without life? Cause all I need is a year that I breathe and my friends and family to believe in me. Deep as the abyss where the waters run, as deep deep as the land of the rising sun. You know I'm down here when the minds are against us. Doesn't even matter, nothing else matters. As deep as the abyss where the waters run. As deep as the land of the rising sun. You know I'm down here when the minds are against us. Doesn't even matter, nothing else matters.
The same blood, we cry the same tears. We have the same fears, we pass the same years. We see the same stars under the same sky. We pass the same time, we all live and die. Cause friends, family, wars stinking in blood. And if never felt love, then I feel for you. Cause lives pass above us and 747s. The seas well below us before they go to heaven. Everything in between our hands and meaning. Some stay connected while others keep fiending, looking for that meaning. But the lost can't be found. Drop to your caps and pray. Now can you hear the sound? Do you feel it? Now do you feel it coming? 200, the hunters are the hunted. Electrical currents conflict with the spirits. Do you hear it? Or do you feel it? Deep like 7 leagues, life intrigues intelligence. Got no time for clutter. You're late if there's hesitance. Put your foot forward and it'll be a helping hand. Take a step back, then you're stuck in the quicksand. And just in toxins keeps us locked in a mental jail trap. 99 where your family at.
And I might fail, oh, I might succeed. Whatever the outcome is, just keep your faith in me. Just believe in me. And I will be there, as deep as the abyss where the waters run. As deep as the land of the rising sun. You know I'm down here when the minds are against us. Doesn't even matter, nothing else matters. As deep as the abyss where the waters run. As deep as the land of the rising sun. You know I'm down here when the minds are against us. Doesn't even matter, nothing else matters. As deep as the abyss where the waters run. As deep as the land of the rising sun. You know I'm down here when the minds are against us. Doesn't even matter, nothing else matters. As deep as the abyss where the waters run. As deep as the land of the rising sun. You know I'm down here when the minds are against us. Doesn't even matter, nothing else matters.
So you sailed away into a gray sky morning. Now I'm here to stay. Love can be so boring. Nothing's quite the same now. I just say your name now, but it's not so bad. You're only the best I ever had. You don't want me back. You're just the best I ever had.